Hello, I'm Kendall Hale, and I'm here with my friend and comrade, Laura Eliot, to engage in conversation with me about what my life has been like since the publication of my book, Radical Passions, A Memory of Revolution and Healing. It was published in 2008, and now it is 2018, so a lot of time has passed. So we're going to be in conversation today. I met Laura on her wonderful radio show called Wild Heart. And it was right after the that amazing women's march in Washington, D.C., with 500,000 women and men and allies last year. And she drew three of us into this wonderful intergenerational dialogue on the program. And then we also continued to do some work together in the context of the Equal Rights Amendment here in Nashville.
Oh, I'm happy to be here in this context. And here's your book. A very wonderful read. I highly recommend it. And one of the things I loved about your book is the honesty, the vulnerability with which you share your story. And, of course, the passion. And it really gives others permission to live their truth. And so here we are 10 years later.
Yeah. 10 years older.
And so being 10 years later, I mean, the landscape is quite different than then. And how would you compare the radical passions of your youth to today?
Well, I was thinking about that this morning, and I was remembering that I think that our generation, and I'm going very soon back to Madison, Wisconsin, because we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of 1968, which is when I was a freshman, 18. And it's 50 years ago. And I was thinking, at that time, there was a lot of turmoil, of course, coming out of that period of history. But I think our generation had a sense of success because we were, our movement to stop the war in Vietnam did actually help stop the war. So I think there was a greater sense of success and change actually happening, and that things that people were protesting and bringing forward as important issues actually made a difference. And I think a lot of young people today have seen a lot of setbacks and a lot of terrorism, both coming from abroad and within our country, and just a sense of kind of where's the vision that the generation that we heard about that was so passionate actually and made such a difference in our culture and did raise issues that did get laws in place. We got a sense that that's being reversed, and some of it really is being reversed slowly, and that's been happening steadily over the last 40 years. So I think that sense of despair might actually be greater for younger people than it used to be, than it was when I kind of entered that period.
So you were coming out of this more quiet times of the 50s. And the flower power time. And I mean, there's also the information age that's very different now that contributes to the way people navigate social activism these days.
Yeah, and I think that has a plus and a minus. I think that things can move really fast, and I saw that recently, as we all did, with the shooting of the students in their high school in Florida, that they were quickly, once they got focused on what they wanted to do and they had the clarity, boy, did they mobilize across the states and actually across the world and communicated that way faster than we could have done.
Right.
And that's an amazing feat, and that's the best use of technology, in my opinion.
Sure.
But I think the downside is so many people now spend so much time in front of their devices, and I think it's created a different sort of isolation and sense of I'm alone, and I'm not really. I mean, Facebook. I'm sorry, it's just not a substitute for really being with people face to face and being in meetings where you can see each other and you can spend social time together and you can be out in the streets. It can facilitate that, but to stop with just Facebook or some kind of online game or whatever it is isn't enough. So,
well, hopefully the pendulum will swing back somewhere in the middle. And there definitely are still meetings happening, people wanting to connect. And, often we live in that contrast world, don't we, to know what we truly want and what is true by living what's not.
Yeah. And I was thinking the other thing is we went through a lot of fear, but we came out, I think, feeling very empowered after the 60s because we had made such deep connections with one another, and we kind of marched off to our various cities and created lives that were based on those values that had really brought us together. And the fear factor was gone. For me, I experienced a lot of like, wow, the war is over, it will never happen again, women are moving forward, civil rights is moving forward. It was very easy to live then. There was a lot of affordable housing, rents were low, the jobs were, you could get a job and quit a job and get a job and quit a job. And so the economy, actually, the fear factor, I think because of so much that's happened, people are afraid now more in a certain way. And the economy is so different, the structure of our economy. From when I moved to Boston, it's really different when I arrived there in 1973.
Yeah.
So.
Any particular wisdom that you would like to share with young warriors of today?
Well, I think if you're going to build sustainable movements around any issue, and there are many that are so important, you really have to create a life that will keep you in balance. And I think that requires, and I know that it's hard because you have to make a living. Many people want families. They do want children. And the issues that we have to solve now are overwhelming. They're huge. Climate change and income inequality and the corporate takeover, the corporate structure of our politics and the deep divides we're facing. But you can't let go of the joy and the warmth of family or friendships. And for me, I think the healing work has been incredibly important. And I think moving to Asheville really set that forward on my path because it's so beautiful here. And if you can pick a place to live that you really love, and could match a job that expresses your values. It doesn't have to be nonprofit. It can be in this profit sector, but it can't be in a company that you feel like, oh well, I'll just work here for a while, make money, and then I'll find something that really lines up with my heart and my values. I mean, by that time, a lot of people are so trapped in that they can't get out of it because they've already created a lifestyle that demands that corporate money or that kind of work schedule. And sometimes it's just impossible to recreate a balance of the things that make you, the spiritual part for me, it's been music consistently. I was in New Harmony Sisterhood, but when I moved here, I very quickly found a way to continue performing my violin and joined orchestras and chamber groups and joined the Asheville Choral Society. And for me, that's what sustains my spirit. It's not a spiritual path, but it really helps keep me, connected to my happiness and my joy. And so I think those are really important. If you're going to be an activist and you're going to really continue giving a large portion of your life. Now, you may have a paid job doing that, or you might not, like I never did. I was always juggling all different pieces, but it does require paying attention to what you eat, to, as they say now, it's self-care.
Sure, yeah.
Really important.
Care for the inner.
Yeah.
Be able to better care for the outer world.
Yeah, really important.
So, in your book, you share, it is essentially a memoir of your life from the 60s, and you touch on your childhood and takes us through your various journeys in your search for that socialist path of life. And so I know you explored many places and paths in search of this ideal way of socialism, right, from the rice lands of China to the heights of the Himalayas.
Yeah.
And it really is amazing to read about how you did just jump in. You knew you wanted to go somewhere, and it was like this passion within you fueled your desire to take you there. And yet when you arrived and experienced wherever it was you were going, that ideal was always out of reach.
Yeah, that was painful, but it was an important lesson, because I think many young people, hopefully go through an idealistic phase, at least for a while, and then reality sinks in. And I think, as you mentioned, I was looking for models out there, Che Guevara and Cuba and Mao Zedong and that whole Cultural Revolution in China, and of course, even back further, the Russian Revolution intrigued me. I was a history major, but the hard knocks of life kind of like, what? The United States is not those countries. We're an experiment here. We have people who came here from all different parts of the world, all different cultures, and it doesn't, we're a melting pot, kind of, but we didn't really all melt. We have a lot of differences still, and very different ideas, even now, about what democracy should be or was meant to be, and where it is and where it's going. And so I had to adjust to that reality, even after all of my hard work to start this political party. It was I think we were correct in seeing, I believe, that we saw that the Democrats and the Republicans here probably weren't going to create what I think would be a model called democratic socialism. And I know Bernie Sanders made references to democratic socialism, and he made references to Denmark, and he got into a lot of trouble by trying to compare the United States to Denmark, for example. And in those smaller countries, they're Nordic, they're homogenous, very much so, and the population has been there for a long time, and they're older. Their countries are far older than, in a sense, modern civilization than we are. But interestingly enough, I don't know that I have never read anything by this woman, and I can't say that I even can pronounce her last name, but I read The Nation magazine regularly, and there was a picture of her on the cover of The Nation, and her name is, she's 42 years old. She's the Prime Minister of Iceland, and her name is Katrine, and I think it's something like Jacobs, but it's a little bit longer. And I said, wow, I don't pay attention to Iceland that much. And all of a sudden I started realizing that she is exactly who I wanted to be.
Right. Okay.
She's 42. She's a feminist. She's an environmentalist. She believes in, pay equity and all of the women's issues of healthcare and reproductive rights have slowly been implemented out of. She was a grassroots organizer, just like I was in my 20s, but because of the huge differences in the two countries, she went straight on up, through some of the parties, and I think created a different party. I'm not an expert on Iceland, but I was so stunned by realizing that, America is not necessarily the exception because here we have this radical changes going on based on everything that I ever wanted in some sense. I mean, it's a model for me that it was stunning in a way to just say, wow. And she kept saying in the interview, it's doable. It's doable. Climate change, sustainability, it's all doable. Look at where I am now.
Right.
And so it was like
inspiring.
And not to be confused again with trying to blueprint from Iceland here, because we've got a long way and we've got all the diversity that, as we know, and the differences are sharp now. But it is a place to still look towards as our own version of that.
Sure.
Could maybe one day. And we could overthrow this corporate right-wing takeover that I think you were asking me some of the biggest differences. And really, while we were certain our movements in the 60s were going to go straight ahead, there was a group of very sophisticated right-wing ideologists that were planning to roll back and to create this right-wing movement that did succeed. And it was slowly going on. And I think that youth, none of us really understood that. It was very secretive. A lot of it was very behind the scenes, and the legislation that was written and the corporate ties in the Democratic Party modeling themselves then on the Republicans. We just lost a lot. We really lost a lot of the interesting and I think are very positive things that happened during, the Roosevelt era, and that path was like, that's old-fashioned. We can't do that anymore. We have to let market capitalism just spring ahead, and it did, and it's created a lot of problems with people just not having the income that they used to. You can't have a family supported by one person anymore. And it's really different, which goes back to what I was saying before about the economy having really been changed radically. So, yeah.
And I would say the other thing about Iceland has a very different history than us too. Of course.
Yeah,
which impacts
of course,
a lot of how we heal as a country and move forward.
Yeah,
policies. And yet, having said that, so if you were to go on another journey, an actual trip, Iceland might be a destination.
Yeah. I think I'd like to. I mean, as much as you can observe, it would be interesting to go there.
Just a quick run through. So you went to China, Cuba, Castro's Cuba,
Nicaragua. And and I was harking back a lot in the early party building movement. I mean, Marxism played a very critical role as far as our understanding of class consciousness and what classes were, because people in the United States were told for a long time that we don't have classes anymore. We don't have a class system really, and anyone can start at the bottom and end up wealthy.
Right.
And that's a myth now. It might have been true for a while, but it really is a myth. It's almost impossible. They've found the class mobility is very difficult now. That if you inherit, if you're in the 1% and 2%, you pretty much stay there. And some of us might get there, but
and that may be the challenge. There was that American dream that I think those from afar are still wanting to come to our borders, thinking that American dream still exists.
Yeah.
And so 10 years ago, much has happened since then. And from what I know of you, I would say you are still living a radically passionate life. But at the finish of writing your book in 2008, your children were grown, and your parents had passed away, and you and your husband had established this beautiful home where we are now on the land outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And also your last major trip at that time was India, because when you arrived in Asheville, you embarked on a deeper journey within. Your focus shifted more fully to that.
Yeah.
So share with us, what has been happening since then. in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. I think moving here from Boston, it's so different. But I think, well, I know that I never would have become a massage therapist if I'd stayed in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have become a yoga teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be sitting here in this little wellness retreat
Mm-hmm.
in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
because the land here and the beauty of the mountains, I'm just pointing outside the window, is what inspired all of this. And I think that, I've always dabbled in the healing arts and in the New Age. And it had started before I moved here, but it certainly got bigger because I found the New Age community really fascinating. The people were so creative, and they were really looking outside the, just the framework of traditional religions and traditional medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and it all,
Mm-hmm.
it made sense to me. I had already had a child that was born with an autoimmune disorder, and had taken him to, chiropractors and to acupuncturists, and had channeled readings about his health because autoimmunity, and now it's continues to be a huge problem. And there were some openings for me in that area, and I learned to be cautious. I think, some channeled stuff is not to be taken too literally, but some of it with the readings I had has been very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way that leads into finding myself here, I think in the end, I think women are still striving to empower ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of women have a much better chance of doing that now than certainly when I was growing up, and certainly our mothers. And I think for me, finally deciding, you know what, I don't really like people working under me, and I don't like people working over me. So what does that mean? It means you have to work for yourself.
Yes.
And I'd never considered that.
Mm-hmm.
I had never considered being self-employed. I don't know why. It just didn't fit the model of being an organizer and being in this party and working in the labor force, which I did. That was the thing you did to be with the people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work where they are and organize where they are. And that era was a lot of heavy industrial work. Now it's all service sector. And I am in the service sector but I'm working for myself. Mm-hmm. And so creating that, I think, was, for me, empowering. It was very empowering to suddenly say, yeah, I'm going to use this beautiful piece of property and land and create something that will bring together my massage skill. I'd already came here and became a massage therapist. And I've always believed that yoga was a form of meditation, truly, in its origins. Mm-hmm. And I believe strongly in meditation, and I think yoga is a very powerful practice. Mm-hmm. So I figured out how to combine them.
Right.
And I've been doing this little retreat here at Sharon Spring Cabin. My opening season was 2004. Wow. So it's been a learning curve. Yes. It really has. Uh-huh. And I've been fortunate to have a husband who's a retired builder and can help with things. But it just suits I think it suits my personality in some sense. And some of my astrology readings had said, this and that. And you have a very introverted part of yourself as well as an extroverted, but you need to feed both of those because you need to stay in balance. You're someone who needs space. You like to engage, but you need space. So, and everyone needs to figure that out for themselves. Right. Because anything you do is going to be poison to your system if you make yourself become someone you're not.
Very true. Yes.
And that is the individuality. Right. The communism apparently, in some societies it's just like, I think the Americans dreaded it so much because they thought we'd all. In China, when I went there, they were all wearing the same clothes, the same color, blue and gray. Right. And it was a lot of look-alike. Right. Which doesn't fit where we're at here.
Yes, Americans like their choices.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
Well, it really is an inspiring journey, your whole life, the choices you made, that you detail in the book and since then. And it requires a lot of trust in the journey. You were out there as the warrior, so to speak, in the world, and all the while cultivating yourself and how to navigate your inner world as you, went out into the world. You went in and became more of a seeker, which all of that, whether it's outer or inner, requires a lot of trust in one's choices and how to be in the world. So speak a bit about your sense of trust in the world and how, what wisdom you might have to share about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think what would happen to me was I would, I at some point I used to blame myself for not becoming the professional that I had started off as a teenager. Oh, well, I'm going to be a sociologist, or I'm going to be a classical violinist. And I would say, oh, you made these choices that ruined it. And I used to get negative feedback from, I won't mention names, but some of my family members would say, you're just ruining your life. You've been given these privileges and you're just ruining your life by not making money and by not becoming, getting status and professionalism. And then I would go through these periods where I would agree with them. I'd say, not to their face, but inside I'd feel like, yeah, you really should have had more guidance. You should have been more careful. You should have been more cautious, because sometimes you can't undo some of the choices. It's nice to say anything's possible, but sometimes it gets harder and harder. And as you age, and for me, I loved being a mom. I loved having my children, and family was important. And that demands sacrifice. You can't just pick up and leave and decide to go back to school or move across the country or do whatever. You're going to be a parent. So that really shapes you tremendously. But on the other hand, sometimes when you jump off the cliff and take a risk, it doesn't manifest right away. You don't feel the gain from that for maybe several years.
Right.
It takes several years to see, wow, I'm glad I did that. It just didn't happen right away. It wasn't like a brand new job where everything was perfect. There were lots of things that were questionable, and you had to really draw from within. The resources and the creativity had to come from within yourself, and that's not for everyone. No, I mean, it can become very unsettling and unstable, and so
it's daunting.
It's daunting, and you can sometimes feel like, wow, I just wish that I'd become a doctor.
I understand that. Yes.
So, I think I've been on a roller coaster with that. And now at my age 68, I feel the happy part is that a lot of the blessings have come back to me. My children are in good shape. They didn't do exactly what I thought they would, but they're fine. And I have a beautiful granddaughter. And my husband is still with me. And, this property and this land, it's fed our souls. We like living around a lot of nature. And I think we both were always drawn to that. That was one of the things I think we had in common. We used to, when we dated and throughout our lives, we were always going canoeing or going out sailing or out biking or hiking was always huge. So in a way, it was like the perfect move to fill that part of our lives. That was kind of easy. The other part was hard to find the jobs and, to recreate a life in the South is different. And in a more rural area, which is what Fairview is.
That was a huge shift coming from the intellectual practicality of Boston to Asheville.
And also we were living in the ghetto in the inner city.
In Boston,
yes.
Right.
I mean, it was very different. So, but, incredible. I mean, to have a life that could embrace both and to tolerate that, be willing. I can't take the kind of risks I used to. I mean, that you're asking me if I still have the passion. But I think with age, I have to think more carefully because my body is not a young body. And I can't necessarily throw a sleeping bag down in someone's backyard or on a church floor at every moment and sleep on the sidewalk or whatever. I just can't do some of those things. And I have, just kind of health issues that are limiting in certain ways. And you have to just be a little more, cautious,
right?
But I still take risks. I mean, I've been doing activism pretty steadily for certainly the last 10 years. That it all it all switched to climate change. And I think, again, the love of nature here in Asheville puts you so in touch with what we might lose if this temperature continues to rise, and then we have these gorgeous oceans right off the coast of North Carolina, and the thought of all those beaches, and we've seen the beaches disappear. You have to keep bringing the sand in. So there was real things that started feeding the passion and the angst about we really have to get control. We've got to get off of fossil fuels. We really do. We really have to put the brakes on some of these corporations that they give lip service to portfolios that support wind and solar and geothermal and all the things that we know can work, and we've seen the European countries and others that are doing it. But we have obstacles here that are very challenging, and it takes a lot of commitment to keep speaking truth to power. For example, Duke Energy spends $80 million a year with its influence on the federal government, the state governments, the local governments, all the politicians. They give money to charities. They greenwash people. And with that kind of money, it's really hard for people, and they create jobs. In Charlotte, it's the headquarters of the Bank of America and Duke, and people are afraid to stand up to those employers. It's like really having a hierarchy back, like in the Middle Ages, where everybody had to work under the church or the king. It's like a modern version sometimes. I think about this corporate empire we have that keeps feeding money into our system, into our political system.
Certainly concerning. But it's interesting. There's a mix of things going on. At the same time, there are institutions that are breaking down as well. And so a lot of chaos. And hopefully that notion of chaos leads to clarity. We have to maintain hope. As you said, as you are getting older in your life, your passion is still there, but the form that you offer, what you do, shifts. And you've shared that Steve describes aging as getting closer to God. Yeah,
it's interesting you found that in the book, and I said, what? Did I put that in the book? Did he say that? Which is why it's good to have someone else read your book. Yes, you did say that. You did. And do you still believe that or whatever? Because it has been a while. Things change. And you say, oh, why did I say that then? Well, that's what you were experiencing then.
Right.
That's the way you perceive things. I think in my own way, I believe that. I think I was raised by ex-Mormons, and my mother was a Unitarian Universalist, but my father remained a very devoted atheist. And that just wasn't really who I was. I felt like I needed to rediscover and reinvent my own path. And that really did thrive here in Asheville. There were just so many fascinating people doing New Age healing and just reading information I would never have touched, I don't think, as deeply as I have since I've been here. Reading the Keys of Enoch, which is this unbelievable, it's a channeled book, but it's like reading the Bible, but with passages that got left out. And things like that, for example, that I just decided, I'm going to start and open my mind up more to ways that I was closed off by my family of origin and a lot of the early years where people just completely dismissed the afterlife or a possibility of past lives or the notion of channeling information from higher beings, the ETs. It's all part of what I decided I was not going to brush aside. It just isn't me. It's really who I am. And it opened, some of those parts of my brain, honestly, I think that the early LSD trips that I took and I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think some of that did open some windows and made it at least a little easier to say, that could be a hallucination, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe there are things that are there that, in other words, a lot of what I say to people is, we don't know what we don't know. Right. And you can say that about anything.
Sure.
So you've got to at least entertain. I mean, you can explore it and then say, that's not for me. It may be a path that I'm not ready for. I mean, you could just completely say it's bunk, and that's not me. I feel like, for example, I've decided, I've been following someone named Tom Kenyon and Judy Sion for many years, and they channel a group of beings called the Hathors, which actually they say came from a parallel universe, and there was a portal, and they came in here, and they channel a group called the Arcturians, which is we do know, we can see Arcturus, we see that star. I mean, it's visible to the naked eye, and people like Edgar Cayce, who many people loved and thought brought them great information and healing, used to refer to them as the highest beings in our galaxy and our galaxy, I guess. So I am actually going to go on a spiritual pilgrimage to France with a woman who calls it the Path of the Blue Rose.
Okay.
And it is a journey that she's led before with all women who want to really find out who Mary Magdalene really was. And they have another story, another series of information, some of it's based in actual fact, that she was there and she was a real woman, but she was not who the Bible presented her as.
Sure.
So I took that path, and I really believe that she had enormous gifts, and just like Heshua did. I feel like that's something that I never had time or interest when I was younger, but if you're going towards those elder years and you haven't put any attention on what it means to transition out of a body into something or nothing, and what is something or nothing, they may be the same thing. Right. I think that's sad. I think that's a mistake to not start to put some attention, whatever it may be, whatever spiritual path you can always find, or a religion, you can always question it or go beyond it, or just look at it again with fresh eyes. Right. So I think that's really a beautiful thing for me, a place to be.
We make the path by walking it.
Yeah.
Right? We often do want to know what's ahead, but we have to experience.
Yeah. You have to. If you don't have any reference point, I don't think you could draw on your own heart. I think you can say, well, I read this, or I did this, or someone told me this, but I think to try and embody it, put yourself in a place where you can feel it becomes more real for you.
Embodiment, yes, which is, I think, greatly needed more and more these days, as many people are in more of the information age, and relying on information to guide their way rather than maybe that journey. It's a long journey to go from here to here, right? and live from that place.
Yeah, living from the heart is connecting the heart with the mind is so incredible for everything, for our values, for creating a new world, a new society, a new America that we can be proud of again.
Anything in particular you'd like to share with your hopes and dreams for creating that new way of being in the world? Any messages you'd like to share?
Well, I guess I just hope that we can build unity around just basic human needs that we need to take care of in this country. We need renewable energy. I think we need Medicare for all. We need to have universal health care. We desperately need to have pay equity and sustainable jobs that are not dangerous for the environment, that are environmental friendly, the products we buy.
Mhm.
I mean, it's still, people are shifting, and I've seen a lot of wonderful changes in that area. Of course, we all are more aware. We have to be more aware.
Mhm.
A lot of people are more aware, you know. But to make those things, I mean, to regulate properly the corporate sector and to make sure the public good is being served at the highest level possible for everything, housing, for jobs, for health, for reproductive rights for women, for pay, all of it. We have to make sure we're all living and we have equal access to everything that it takes to create a good life, you know. And
it can be overwhelming to think about what all there is to do, which is often talked about in the realm of being in the world with social activism. And there is a notion, a quote by someone who escapes me right now about, think about what breaks your heart, and know from that place where to put your energies.
Yeah, that's a very good one to do. If you don't know what to do, and you see someone or you hear about something and it does make your heart crack, maybe working in that area will mend that for you, because you may resonate because of some injury or some experience that reminds you of it, or it's a good guide.
Yes,
it's a really good guide, I think.
Right. Yeah. Well, your story again is very inspiring. Your book, Radical Passions, really, it's gripping. I mean, the story after story, and it's our lives can be very circuitous when we follow the passion within.
Yeah.
And you continue to do that, and find the next place to go to explore. And going off to France, explore more of what went on, as well as that will obviously nurture your soul.
Yeah, so, I hope so.
Yeah,
and that's again, it's. Sometimes I like to have expectations, but then I say, you know what? Don't expect too much. Just be open to the possibility of it. May not look like you thought it was going to be, but you might learn something anyway. You might learn something very different that you didn't think you were going to learn. So don't have this perfect picture of any trip or journey or job or, I mean, certainly a marriage. You never know who you're really going to marry.
That's right.
And I have been with my husband 35 years, but you've got to change and grow and understand that everything is particularly now, I think like you said, there's a lot of chaos, but out of chaos comes beauty and order.
Sure. Yeah.
A new beauty and order, and then there's chaos again.
It's part of the creative cycle of life.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Yeah. Yes, living the life of uncertainty is really a masterful experience of being comfortable with that.
Yeah, and you have done it to a great extent, from what I understand.
To an extent. It's not that I still have my moments. Obviously, I think as long as we're in the skin.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be here in my guest cabin.